Crossroads of the Ozarks, it's P.I.D. Radio. Welcome, I'm Derek Gilbert.
I'm Sharon Gilbert, and you cannot stop us. We're here. We are here. We're going to blather until you just shut us right
With
off.
our army of atomic-powered supermen.
Welcome. We've been watching cheesy movies.
Yeah, it kind of sets you in a good mindset for the kind of things that we talk about. We'll say again, we do take this information that we communicate seriously, but at the end of the day, the joy that we feel comes from knowing that God, who's seen the end from the beginning, has already prepared the way for us. And so we can step back, remember Psalm 2, and that these kings of the earth who are conspiring with one another are imagining a vain thing. And from his throne in heaven, God laughs in derision.
He really does.
So,
and you know, the kings of the earth imagining a vain thing, it makes it sound as if they have all agreed upon a plan. Mm-hmm. And that day may come, and it probably will come if you look at Bible prophecy. But I would say that right now, the spirits behind the quote-unquote kings of the earth, they're really squabbling. Case in point, Germany.
Oh, yeah.
Has this sort of collection of conspiracy theorists, is what the leftist, the mainstream media are calling them, and they're led by various leaders within their factions. One of them calls himself King Peter. He is king of the kingdom of Germany.
Okay, and so this is not the same guy who. No.
So
we've got another
Heinrich.
guy.
This is Peter.
Okay. Interesting. So You've got groups that want to restore the monarchy to Germany, which we haven't seen since Kaiser Wilhelm went. Oh,
that's the king.
He imagines himself as Vlad.
He also wants his own TV show.
Well, why not? I mean, if Megan can do it.
Well, exactly. Well, Peter the First says that he is leader of 5,000 citizens. They have their own bank. They mint their own money. They have ID cards and a flag.
Okay.
I guess if you and I really wanted to, we could issue little ID cards, that you could download and print out on your own at home. We could be the kingdom of Dachshundia. Sam the First he's gone to heaven, but he's here in spirit, and he still rules. But yeah, I don't know.
So Peter's followers are the Delusionati.
Well, good one. But I bring this up. Yes, it is laughable, but I bring it up because these guys are serious. Mm-hmm. Some of these guys are really serious, and supposedly some of them they had a plan to take down the Bundestag, the government of Germany. A coup d'etat was planned, according to the German police, and they just arrested a bunch of them. That's the Heinrich guy that they were going to put in, Heinrich VIII or something.
Yeah, Heinrich the 13th.
13th, sorry.
Yeah, who is he's 71-year-old Prince of Reuss, who had already, according to the Daily Mail, which does the best reporting on American and world politics of any news source that we found.
Yes, they have a lot of sensational stories and a lot of, eye candy for certain guys. Right. But they truly do have really good investigative reporting. Of
the corporate media sites that we look at, the Daily Mail is consistently the one that's been breaking. They were all over the Hunter Biden laptop story at the same time as the New York Post back in September of 2020.
Yes, they were all over it. In fact, the New York Post and the Daily Mail were sort of in a race to see who could break the most stories.
Right, but the Daily Mail never got canceled over here because most Americans don't look at the Daily Mail.
Right.
New York Post got canceled, as we found out from Elon Musk's info dump from Twitter over the last week and a half. But the Daily Mail, if you just ignore the right-hand column with all the pictures of Kardashians, you really find out stuff that you're not going to see in the New York Times, Washington Post, and so forth.
So true. Well, I look at their stories two ways. I get it on my aggregator, the company called Feedly. It's that app. But I also have the Daily Mail app, which sort of bypasses a lot of the what you and I call dancing homers that you see on all of these distracting ads and things. Right. Bypasses a lot of that. So, yeah, the Daily Mail, they've been breaking a lot of stuff, and they're still going after the Hunter Biden story.
Right.
And they're going after these various factions within Germany.
And according to the Daily Mail, this Heinrich the 13th had a team and a former paratrooper named only in the whatever police information was released, Rudiger Von P, I suppose, was going to start a new army from the ranks of current Bundeswehr Defense Force and police forces. Again, the delusionati, the idea that this 71-year-old minor prince of a minor junior faction of the old German or Prussian royalty would somehow take over the country and that Germans would go along with this.
It goes back to this teeny-weeny little duchy back in the day.
Right. It's not really rational.
No.
But it does indicate the way politics around the world are a little more complicated, convoluted, fractured than we think. We have, for example, we look at Ukraine. We think, oh, Ukrainians, they're all Ukrainian and they're all supporting the Ukrainian government. No, it's just as divided, maybe more divided than we are here in the United States. And I think by extension, we can get some clues as to how the spirit realm works.
That's where I was going with the whole thing. If you watch, you and I often talk about the Theopolitics, the idea of looking at the spirits behind the headlines, the geopolitical headlines. If you only look at the human involvement, you will get discouraged and confused because it changes so much day to day. And there is within the mainstream media, at least, there is a very far left bias and a lot of programming going on in that we're being convinced, they think, that certain things are now evil, and therefore we have to stand against them. Hashtags. But theopolitically, these spirits all are trying to gain control of the Temple Mount. And it's sort of a contest to see who gets to sit there.
Again, just look at any political fight. We see this in Israel for sure, with all various factions squabbling and making alliance deals based on their own self-interest. And sometimes you'll get factions that will align with other factions, even though they don't like them. For example, the recent government headed up by Naftali Bennett and Yair Lapid.
Yeah, coalitions.
Right. So you had right wing, left wing, and then the Arab parties, who none of the Israeli parties liked. They were all unified by their singular hatred of Benjamin Netanyahu. And that led to a government that lasted, 6 months? That's kind of the fallen realm. They all hate God sitting on his throne, but they all want to be the one who takes his place. So they're fighting with one another.
And they're trying to see who's head of the local fiefdoms within their regions. As we've read in the Bible, there are princes of location. There's the prince of Persia, the prince of Greece. There's probably a prince of Rome, even though he's not named per se. So, and I'm not talking about the Pope. I'm talking about spiritual entities that rule a literal kingdom. Some area within the earth. They have regional authority. And this goes back to the 70 or 72 or whatever the number was that the Lord sent down post-Babel to rule the human beings.
And it may have been more than 70. It's just that number in the ancient Near East represented all of them. So all of the nations except for Israel had an angel or a son of God.
They still do. And they've all, the ones that were sent down, most of them, if not all of them, have turned against him.
Yeah. And they're under a death sentence, Psalm 82. Though you are gods, all of you, sons of the Most High.
Can you read Psalm 82? Those of you who aren't familiar with this is a foundational psalm that gives you the counsel, the divine counsel concept. And Mike Heiser sort of pointed the way to it a long time ago. Yeah, thank you, Dr. Mike.
And he admits that this is a psalm that really set him on his current path, on his lifelong journey of research and writing, and led to books like The Unseen Realm, Reversing Hermon, and his two readers' companions for the Book of Enoch. Psalm 82, reading from the English Standard Version, Psalm of Asaph. God has taken his place in the divine council. There's where we get that phrase, but bookmark that mentally. I want to come back to that because I think there may be more there than is on the surface.
Could be.
God has taken his place in the divine council. In the midst of the gods, he holds judgment. In the midst of the Elohim. A lot of Bible commentators will say, well, this refers to human judges. God is condemning the rulers of Israel for ruling unjustly over his people. But the word Elohim in Hebrew never refers to humans. It always refers to spirit beings. God has taken his place in the divine council. In the midst of the gods, he holds judgment. How long will you judge unjustly and show partiality to the wicked? Selah. Give justice to the weak and the fatherless. Maintain the right of the afflicted and the destitute. Rescue the weak and the needy. Deliver them from the hand of the wicked. They have neither knowledge nor understanding. They walk about in darkness. All the foundations of the earth are shaken. Verse 6 now, God speaking, I said, you are gods, sons of the Most High, all of you. Nevertheless, like men you shall die and fall like any prince.
Well, let me read the Septuagint to you. It's very similar, and this gives you an idea of what the translators in around 300 BC or so, with a manuscript to which we no longer have access, they were soaking in this idea not only of the Hebraic history, but also of Greek culture. A psalm for Asaph. God stands in the assembly of gods. This is the Brenton Septuagint translation. And in the midst of them will judge gods. How long will you judge unrighteously and accept the persons of sinners? Pause. That's Selah. Judge the orphan and poor. Do justice to the low and needy. Rescue the needy and deliver the poor out of the hand of the sinner. They know not nor understand. They walk on in darkness. All the foundations of the earth shall be shaken. I have said, you are gods, and all of you children of the Most High, but ye die as man, as men, and fall as one of the princes. Arise, O God, judge the earth, for thou shalt inherit all the nations. That's the sentiment of the psalmist at the end. Right.
It's understood in the time of the psalmist, Asaph, that each nation had its own patron god, and we see those in the Bible where the
These
Ammonites,
princes.
Right, the princes, the Ammonites, their chief god was Milcom, Molech, in other words. The chief god of Moab was Chemosh, and so on. Each country had its own patron deity. The Arameans, their chief god was the storm god Baal Hadad, or Baal.
Prince of Greece was referred to as
Zeus.
And the irony there, of course, is if indeed that is Zeus, according to the Lord himself, that's Satan.
Yeah. He makes that reference in the letter to Pergamum in Revelation 2. I know where you live, where Satan dwells. So that was the home of the great altar of Zeus, which is now in Berlin. But he also hints at that in Matthew 12, where he's confronted by the Pharisees who are, throw a hypothetical at him. A woman marries a man and dies without having children. So his brother marries her and he dies. The third brother marries her, he dies, and so on and so on and so on. So whose wife will she be in the resurrection? And this is often used as a proof text by those who don't want to accept the Genesis 6 paradigm as meaning what it says, where the sons of God, angelic beings, saw that the daughters of men were fair and went in and produced children, the giants. No, because Jesus said, in the resurrection, they are like the angels in heaven, neither marrying nor given in marriage. The key there is in heaven. The angels in Genesis 6 weren't in heaven, but it's also a reference to what we will be like in the resurrection, which doesn't get preached. Resurrection doesn't get preached enough. Our resurrection doesn't get preached enough.
In heaven was where they were created to be, their first estate. We're told they left it.
Yeah.
Their first home. They're where they're supposed to be, and they wandered over here to earth, and they decided to disobey.
Yeah. So we got that aspect of it, but because I rabbit trailed down the whole resurrection thing. But in the other part was that Jesus is accused of casting out demons by the power of Beelzebul, which means Baal the prince.
Right.
And that's when he responds by saying, well, if Satan casts out demons by his own power, how will Satan's kingdom stand? So he's connecting Baal and Zeus to Satan. The storm god is Satan. I would argue the prince of this world, or the god of this world.
I would too.
As Jesus argues.
I would too. So think about that. The Lord was tempted by Zeus.
Yeah. Yeah, and if he's casting out demons, which he was, he's casting out the spirits of the demigods destroyed in the flood. So he very well might have done battle with Hercules too.
Yeah.
So it's interesting that we see that in Psalm 82, this idea that God appears in the midst of this heavenly court and passes judgment on these entities to which he delegated, or to whom he delegated the administration of earth after the Tower of Babel.
Exactly. Now, if you're sitting there going, hold on just a minute, Zeus claimed to be the son of Kronos, who claimed to be the son of Uranus.
Yeah.
And wait a minute, they cannot have children with themselves. No, they can't, but they
Correct.
lie.
They lie.
They lie. They're playing parts. It's a massive sort of infernal Shakespearean play that's going on.
Right. And we see this even in the human realm with kings who claim descent from the gods, or even from other...
Alexander.
Right. Or even, I can claim to be a descendant of Old King Cole, one of my Welsh ancestors.
I believe I can too, now that I think about it. Didn't we find out that my ancestry went back to that as well? But anyway, yes.
Yeah. Coil Hayne, who was a ruler in early post-Roman Britain, and all the kings of the Celtic tribes left behind claimed to descend from him.
Well, I descend from Edward I through his daughter Joan of Arc.
See, but you legitimately do.
I do. Does that mean I've got a right to the throne?
Well, no, but my point was that a lot of humans, as well as these spirits, will claim descent from anyone who gives them the authority to. So, I'm the son of Kronos, so I get to rule. I'm, a descendant of Old King Cole, so I guess I get to be a merry old soul.
Bunch of liars, but here's the thing. They have stood in this council. They've been called, and he's warned them.
Yes.
He's telling them what they should be doing, but they haven't done it. They haven't turned around from their behavior and changed. Makes you wonder if during this, if one of them, even one of them, had repented and said, I am so sorry, I'm going to completely change, and did change, if the Lord would allow them, another chance.
That's a really good question. And I know that's one that you explore in book 7 of the Red Wing Saga.
Right. But what we see in Psalms is, it sounds like not one of them is going to do it.
No.
He foreknew what was in their minds. And this is something that I get asked a lot, as well do you, that why would the Lord create the angels, knowing that some of them were going to sin? Why would he create human beings, knowing that we were going to behave the way that Adam and Eve were going to fail, and it was going to go? We don't know, but we do know that this is a morality play. The Lord is showing the angels who sinned his compassion through mankind. Yeah,
and he like humanity, he created the angels with free will. He did not create automatons who could not help but do everything he said and to love him. He created all of us with free will so that we would love him of our own accord.
Here's the trick, and by the way,
choose to love him.
Human scientists, computer scientists, are trying to create a sentient artificial intelligence, an algorithm that knows who it is and has free will.
What can possibly go wrong?
What could possibly go wrong with that? I mean, seriously. Well, of course they've thought about it. Elon Musk. He said it was a stupid thing to do.
Yep.
It's a demon.
Literally summoning the demon, he says. And yet, he's going forward with it, and they're supposed to launch tests of Neuralink here soon.
Well, yes. Neuralink has been tested
human trials. They've been testing it in monkeys, right? I
read that actually they've begun the human trials on one individual. So depending upon how it goes with him, and I think it was a male who volunteered, that then they will proceed after that. Bearing in mind that what we're told in the news is probably old news. Yeah,
and I suspect for something like that, they're not going to reveal too much too soon.
No, but what I read is that they've already got one male who's been implanted.
Okay.
So we'll see what happens, and he'll probably do it on, Twitter Live or TikTok or something. I mean, they're doing all those surgeries on TikTok now. Good grief, the things that they're doing on TikTok.
Don't want to see, well, we don't use TikTok. We got friends who will send us TikTok videos. It's like, summarize, please, not going to TikTok.
And if you're laughing and saying, okay, this is an entire generation that's being raised by TikTok, yeah, that's true. But I would argue that there's an older generation that's been raised by YouTube. An awful lot of people.
Our generation raised by TV. So,
well, exactly.
It's just getting more and more personal.
Andy Griffith was right. I mean, let's face it.
Carl Betts on the Dina Reed Show. Father knows best. Yeah, Father really did know best.
Oh, yeah.
Ward Cleaver.
And getting back to our original statement, these cheesy 1950s horror movies. This is what really gave us science back in the day. You know, when I was a kid, I loved those movies. I truly loved those movies. But at the same time, on Saturday mornings, there was always this show about surgery. And so it was this medical program for about half an hour where you would actually watch surgeries. And my dad just looked at me like, why are you watching this? I said, this is great. This is I want to be a surgeon. I want to, be one of those people that figures out. I wanted to be a pathologist. I actually did. So, yeah, well, that's just how my brain
Not
works.
me. I wanted to be Ron Santos' replacement, successor at third base for the Chicago Cubs, but, that didn't work out so well.
How would that work into
Eye-hand coordination.
1950s horror movies?
Well,
Ron Santos would be a giant who was altered by atomic space.
No. The Chicago Cubs during the 1950s were a horror show. I mean, Ernie Banks notwithstanding, he won the MVP twice running for a last place team. But other than that, the Cubs were awful.
Honey, I'm
Do
sorry.
they still sing the blues in Chicago?
Oh, well.
When baseball
They did have one good year in your own lifetime.
They've had a couple of good years. Yeah. And next year's looking better. They've signed a couple of free agents in the offseason. So anyway.
Well, that's good.
But coming back to Psalm 82 very quickly, because I think, again, this is such a rich text that is eye-opening when you really dig into it. I mean, first of all, you've got this courtroom scene in heaven where God assembles the gods, the small g gods, and says, look, to whom I've delegated this authority. Mm-hmm. And if you're looking for the biblical reference for that, it's Deuteronomy 32, verse 8, when God divided the nations, this being after the Tower of Babel, he numbered them according to the number of the B'nai Ha-Elohim, the sons of God. And then also you see this in Deuteronomy 4, 19 and 20, when God warns Moses to tell the Israelites not to bow down and worship the sun, the moon, all the host of heaven, reference to the angelic realm, things he has allotted to the nations for their inheritance. So God delegated to these B'nai Ha-Elohim the administration of earth after Babel. It's like he said to humanity, okay, look, you want the gods to come live with you again as they did before the flood? Fine, I'm going to give you what you want. In the same way that he gave Israel Saul when they demanded a king. And that didn't turn out well. Saul wound up being a pretty lousy king. Then back to Psalm 82. God takes his place in the divine council. That phrase in Hebrew, divine council, is Adat El. And the New English translators render it the assembly of El.
Ah.
Now, El was the creator god of the Canaanites. And I showed in my book, The Second Coming of Saturn, that El was to be identified.
Don't panic while you're listening to this. This goes in a really cool place.
Yeah. That El was the same entity as Milcom, the chief god of the Ammonites, in other words, Molech, but also Enlil, Dagon, Asher, Kronos,
you really
Saturn.
get into very good evidence for this in the Second Coming of Saturn, which, by the way, you can get from either our store at gilberthouse.org/store, or you can get it from Amazon, or you can go to Skywatch TV store.
Right. And the Kindle versions at Amazon. If you're overseas and you can't or don't want to pay for shipping, you can get a Kindle version from Amazon.
I've been shocked at some of the shipping prices to overseas.
Yeah. But here's the translator's notes, and this is one of the reasons we really like the New English translation. They provide study notes, but also translator's notes that explain why they translate certain things certain ways. It gives you a lot of insight. The phrase Adat El, or Assembly of El, or Divine Council, if you will, appears only here in the Old Testament. It's the only place that phrase is used, which means it's weird, and as Mike Heiser says, if it's in the Bible and it's weird, it's important. Some understand El to refer to God himself, and that's what we see in the ESV. God stands in the divine council. In this case, he's pictured presiding over his own heavenly assembly. And I'm okay with interpreting Psalm 82 that way. But they add, others take Adat El, or El rather, is the word translated assembly, Adat, as a superlative. God stands in the great assembly, or divine assembly.
Right.
The present translation, talking now about their rendering of it, the assembly of El, assumes this is a reference to the Canaanite high god El, who presided over the Canaanite divine assembly. See Isaiah 14:13, where El's assembly is called the stars of El. I will put my throne in the uttermost north above the stars of El as opposed to stars of God.
Right.
Yeah. In the Ugaritic myths, the phrase Adat Elohim, essentially, refers to the assembly of the gods who congregate in the house of a king who's petitioning El for help, where Baal asks El to bless the king's house. If the Canaanite divine assembly is referred to, this is what's important. If the Canaanite divine assembly, the assembly of El, is referred to here in Psalm 82, verse 1, then the psalm must be understood as a bold polemic against Canaanite religion. Israel's God invades El's assembly, denounces its gods as failing to uphold justice, and announces their coming demise.
I think this may have been fulfilled. Transfiguration.
So God
Mount Hermon.
appears in the midst of the infernal assembly.
Yes, because the infernal assembly, the threshing floor of El, that's on top of Mount Hermon.
Right.
Where did he transfigure?
On this Mount Hermon.
Exactly. And he had Moses and Elijah with him representing the entire judgment, for we get to judge the angels. I think that they represented us. They may well also be the two witnesses who are required when you have a judgment going on. You have to have witnesses.
Right. That's really intriguing. So what we're seeing in Psalm 82 is not just a courtroom scene in heaven where God is denouncing these angels. God shows up in the middle of this assembly of fallen angels and says, you're all going to die like men. But we see in Psalm 68 another reference that is, I think, may point to that same future event or maybe a past event. Psalm 68, beginning at verse 15, O mountain of God, mountain of Bashan, which is a reference to Mount Hermon. O many-peaked mountain, mountain of Bashan, why do you look with hatred, O many-peaked mountain, at the mount that God desired for his abode? Yes, where Yahweh will dwell forever. In other words, Mount Hermon, why are you jealous of Mount Zion? Because that's where God's going to set his throne. Then verse 17, the chariots of God are twice 10,000, thousands upon thousands. The Lord, Adonai, is among them. Sinai is now in the sanctuary. That's a difficult phrase. The New English translation renders it this way. The Lord comes from Sinai in holy splendor. So he's coming from his mountain in the south, and he's taking over this mountain in the north of Israel.
Yes, exactly. He's claiming all the land promised to Abraham.
Right. You ascended on high, leading a host of captives in your train, and receiving gifts among men, even among the rebellious, that Yahweh, God, may dwell there. He ascended on high, leading captives. It's like
spirits.
He launched a military assault against Mount Hermon.
Don't you love that?
Yeah.
Don't you love, whether it's future or it's past? We don't know for certain. But the Lord God Almighty bringing chariots, lots and lots and lots of chariots, that's the opposite to the chariots that are supposed to come when El at his threshing floor summons them, and they ride in chariots to cross from the land of the dead to the land of the living.
Yes. That is, I'd forgotten about that aspect.
My army's going to outdo yours.
I got more chariots than you got.
In fact, I won't even let them cross over.
Yeah. You're dead, and you're still dead. But Paul quotes this verse in Ephesians 4, verse 8. Therefore, it says, when he ascended on high, he led a host of captives. Christ's victory over the darkness.
I know. I love it. It is so, so good. Now, there are some people who might listen to us, not be believers, or maybe don't believe in the Genesis 6 paradigm.
It's funny you say that, because I was just, for curiosity's sake, looking at some of the comments or reviews that have been left at some of the podcasting sites where you can find this podcast, by the way, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Spreaker, Stitcher,
different opinions.
Yeah. And one of the comments gave us a 5-star review and said, I don't agree with a thing they say, but I love to listen. It's like, okay.
They're hilarious.
Great.
Well, thank you for listening. Regardless of what your background and your beliefs are, we're glad you're here.
Amen.
And we know that some of you would argue that all of these, the mentions of chariots and all that just implies an alien invasion. Alien in the idea, that they're not like you and I. We are human beings, whereas the angels, the Elohim, were created to live in a dimension beyond our sight.
Mm-hmm.
And they're going to be crossing over, but the dead will not.
Right. And there are
so it's combining this zombie invasion with, the invasion of the dead with the invasion of the supposed aliens. If you're going to get back to cheesy 1950s movies, that's what this is picturing. But that's the 1950s movies interpretation of these verses. You and I would interpret this according to everything else that's in the Bible, and it all starts in the garden.
Mm-hmm.
With that sin, and then we get to the Genesis 6 sin, and then there's the post-Babel sin event,
mm-hmm.
and these are sins within the spirit realm. And then you get into, and if you're thinking, no, the sin of Genesis 3, if you're familiar with it, that's Adam and Eve, you're saying, no, that's human. No, there was a spirit being who started it off.
It wasn't a talking snake.
No. Oh, no.
Nakash is not a talking snake.
No. So, there's a whole lot there. And if you are interested in this kind of stuff, we would direct you to any of Derek's books. You can just look up Derek P. Gilbert, get the Kindles if you want to, get a paper book version of it that,
mm-hmm.
If you would like having that physical book in your hands, there are lots of places to get it, including through gilberthouse.org.
And in fact, my last book, The Second Coming of Saturn, I spun out as a series of articles on the web. You can basically you can read
get most of the book,
90% of the book at my website for free. DerekPGilbert.com.
Yeah, and you've got a sort of a companion DVD that goes with it. 13, is it 13?
13 parts.
Yes,
and one
13,
quarter of a year.
Not to be weird. Yeah, exactly. A lot of churches go in quarters, so that gets you through 13 weeks of lessons. But you can also go to Dr. Michael Heiser, because he is the one, as we said, who started us down this path. I've
mm-hmm.
always believed in Genesis 6 being angels coming down and mingling with women. But the divine council paradigm was new to me mm-hmm. until Heiser.
Yeah, and we stumbled onto that in the early 2000s.
We've been around for a long time.
Yeah.
That's his Heiser.
Right, right.
We're all over 100 years old apiece. only if you add our ages.
But if you go back in the archives on our app, our free app, which mm-hmm. you can find at gilberthouse.org/app or PIDradio.com/app, gets you all of our content. And in mm-hmm. the classic PID radio episodes, you'll find our first interviews with Mike, with Tom Horn, and so on, as we were beginning to try to understand this worldview.
And we grappled with it. There were a lot of we talked to people about aliens. We talked to people about conspiracy theories.
Right.
You could just about name it. And not everyone we interviewed, they weren't all Christians.
True. And you can hear. I don't know if you want to go through all 1,600 hours of audio that we have available, but
do you want to punish yourself?
Yeah, but you'll hear in some of those early interviews, one in particular I think about, because I've done a lot of reading about Mesopotamian religions over the last 6 or 7 years, and I wouldn't call myself an expert, but I've got a pretty good basic understanding now. We were talking to Stan Deo about the victory stela of Naram Sin, who was one of the most powerful kings of the Akkadian Empire in the 24th century BC. And this stela shows him climbing a mountain with the bodies of his enemies, stacked up around the base of the mountain. And at the top of the mountain is what looks like a representation of a starburst or something. And I asked Stan, does it represent a portal or a stargate?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I now know that was the symbol of the sun god Shamash.
Right.
I didn't know that then, and had I known that, and it's well known by scholars, by archaeologists and historians. No, that's just the symbol of the sun god, and
You and I are just crazy enough to actually read the academic papers now.
Yeah.
We're so totally boring now, but seriously, a lot of that information is not known in Christian circles at all.
And it's the kind of thing that you're very few and far between are the pastors who actually teach on this thing. Doug Van Dorn in Boulder, Colorado is one. There's another fellow whose name, of course, I'm now forgetting, who's become a regular at the Prophecy Watchers conferences. Brandon, I'll look it up
House?
here. No. He's a pastor out in California, and I stumbled on one of his.
Brandon House, isn't it?
Yeah. But he was one of his videos was recommended to me by YouTube, and I started watching it, and he starts talking about the Apkallu, which were the Mesopotamian the name Mesopotamians gave to the characters the Hebrews called the Watchers.
Mm-hmm.
The Mesopotamians knew who they were. They just had a different view of those things.
Well, one of the hosts of Prophecy Watchers, Mondo Gonzalez, he likes to read these papers, and he also, I think they're even building an observatory.
Yes, they're calling it the Psalm 19 Project.
Yeah.
So Mondo is working on that, and as asteroid Apophis gets closer and closer, they will be doing some actual scientific observations of this thing, independent of the information that comes out of NASA or any of the other space agencies. Brandon Holthouse who's who I was trying to think of. He's in Bakersfield, senior pastor of Rock Harbor Church there. He was the one talking about the Apkallu. Like, other than Doug Van Dorn, I didn't know that there was any pastor in North America who'd heard of the Apkallu. But so if you find a pastor who understands this worldview and realizes that the Bible, which just requires recognizing that the Bible wasn't written in a vacuum.
Right.
The Hebrew prophets and the apostles, they knew what their neighbors believed. And a lot of what's in the Bible is written as polemic against that. Like, for example, Psalm 82. There are other polemics.
There are so many of them. And that's why I love to go back to the Septuagint, because the translators going from the Hebrew into the Greek, they were trying to present an Old Testament, what we would call the Old Testament. They would try to present that to a new audience. And the Greeks could now understand what the Hebrews were talking about. They couldn't read Hebrew, but they could read Greek. So these translators were doing that. Well, that has been brought down to us today without the original manuscript, but that translation in Greek has been translated into a lot of languages, including English. But getting into the idea of archaeological studies, there was a story this morning that just came out. This whole city of Nimrud has been excavated since the mid-19th century, discovered back then and probably was excavated even before that. But it was excavated in the 1850s. And this discovery of a threshold into the palace of the king was probably discovered by that very 19th century explorer. And they believe now, reburied it. And it's been just rediscovered. And I bring this up, not because I love 19th century archaeology, which I do. It was called, antiquarianism at the time. I love the fact that it brings into play this same idea that we're dealing with a spirit realm. When you move into the realm of the king, you're moving into a space that is connected to the spirit realm. The king represented the ruler of that particular place. And Nimrod had a very specific god. And what he was, as far as the type of god, he may have been a grain god, but others say no, he was probably a storm god. But he, this threshing floor, sorry, not a threshing floor, threshold, the idea of threshold, that evokes the threshing floor, which was a portal, not just a place to separate grain. It was a place to connect with the grain god, which is another reason it was a portal. But this threshold stone, it's a liminal space, which means you cross from one domain into another. You cross from the public space into the kingly space. You cross from the world of man into the world of the gods, or in this case, the world of the god, because the king represented this particular god, who again may have been, who knows what. He may have been...
We're talking about Ninurta?
Not Ninurta. I have this in front of me. I'm trying to find the name of the god. And if you're shouting it at us, don't do that.
It doesn't work. This is a one-way transmission. Just sit back and let the hooks do their work. There was a temple of Ninurta in Nimrud.
Yes,
there was. Ninurta was the patron of Nimrud.
Oh, okay. Well, sorry, I was trying to think of a different god name, but...
it was also known as Ningirsu.
Yes. The king, by the way, was Adad, which is very much like Hadad.
Yeah, that was the
Nerari
Akkadian.
the third.
Yeah, that was the Akkadian spelling.
Yep. So they had a temple to Isis or Ishtar or whatever you want to call it. There was a lot of Greek influence in some of these areas. This is probably before Alexander, 6th century BC or so, do you think? The Assyrian Empire?
Well, no, really the 9th and the Neo-Assyrian Empire. Yeah, there was an older Assyrian Empire around the time of Abraham, but they really weren't called Assyrians back then.
That's true.
But the Assyrian Empire really rose to prominence after about 1000 BC and really in the 9th century, because we see the wars that Ahab had to engage in, where it forced the Edomites and the Ammonites and the Moabites to, with Israel and Judah and the Arameans to try to all band together to hold off the Assyrians. And they did for a little while, but not forever.
Right.
Because it was in the 8th century that the Assyrians overran the kingdom of Israel, 722 BC.
Right. And by the way, I said it was the 1850s. It was 1840s. Mm-hmm. Austin Henry Layard. And I found a public domain version of one of his books regarding this whole investigation. And I think it's fascinating. Of course, the Red Wing saga all takes place in the 19th century so far. We're going to be moving forward in book 9. 10 and 11 and 12 are all 20th century. It's going to move very quickly from war to war and setting up another war.
Well, as we're speaking about wars and whatnot, we've got wars and rumors of here in the 21st century. So we'll talk a little bit more about what's going on in Ukraine and Russia.
Yeah, 5 and 10 guy. Tell us the news.
Massive, I shouldn't say massive, but a rather significant escalation of that war. And we'll talk about that when P.I.D. Radio continues. You have blessed us with your support during our first year in ministry. You literally make it possible for us to do what we do. And so as we prepare to head into a new year, we want to return the blessing to you. Through January, we've prepared a number of special offers at the Gilbert House store, and we're featuring the Red Wing Saga, Sharon's wonderful series of supernatural thrillers that teaches spiritual warfare through masterful storytelling with fascinating historical mysteries as the backdrop. Now, all 8 novels in the Red Wing Saga, a $160 value, can be yours for just $110, a savings of $50. You'll also find the Derek Gilbert collection, all 5 of my nonfiction books, a $100 value for just $70. Those are just 2 of the special offers available through January at our online store. You'll find it at gilberthouse.org/store. And as always, we thank you for your prayers and your support. Welcome back to PID Radio. I'm Derek Gilbert.
I am Sharon Gilbert, and we want to just go check out our website, gilberthouse.org/whatever. Gilberthouse.org. Lots of stuff there. There's the store. There's the free app. There's Travel with Us. There's the /travel, which will tell you about our trip to Israel.
Lots of slashing at the website. /store, /app, /travel.
That'll get us canceled. Don't be going there. We hashtag.
Yes.
Hashtag. No, actually, there are lots of. There's a menu, and we would love for you to go there. And if you do a little shopping, that helps us to pay the bills. But if you don't, that's okay too. We just are delighted that you will even drop by to say hello
and giving us some of your valuable time. We do appreciate that.
We really, really do, especially as we move into this season, because everybody's out shopping or spending time with family. Some of you are trying to work and looking forward to your few days off, but. We're even going to take a week off. Crazy.
Surprise.
Yeah.
Surprise.
We hardly ever take any time off. But yeah, that's one reason. In fact, we're trying to do some more writing this month. So if you've noticed that if we get into a season where suddenly you're seeing reruns of Sci Friday or reruns of Unraveling Revelation, that is why, because we are trying not to produce any new shows yet, because we're trying to write, which is why we revived PID Radio, because Sci Friday, which is a video presentation, is going to take a little hiatus for a while.
Yep. Takes more time to produce the 30 minutes of Sci Friday, way more time than it does to produce this 1 hour of audio.
This one's so fast, we just, we just yak and then push the button.
Yeah, more or less.
Push the button, Frank. Speaking of cheesy movies, MST3K, oh yeah. But you were talking about the getting into, what are you looking at?
That fly. There's a fly here. It's mid-December and there's a fly.
Every one of our windows has a fly. Have you noticed that?
I have. It's like when I recorded Fridays 5 and 10, there were 2 of them in that.
Yeah, 5 and 10?
Yeah. Like, what the?
Well,
anyway,
you started out with 5 flies
King.
and turned into 10. It's sort of crazy.
This past week, Ukraine using modified Soviet reconnaissance drones, jet-powered reconnaissance drones.
Yes.
So these are Soviet-era, Russian-made reconnaissance drones that were left behind in Ukraine after Ukraine became an independent state about 30 years ago, were modified and used to hit several Russian air bases, hundreds of miles inside Russian territory. And this is a pretty big deal because one of those, at least, was the home of some of Russia's long-range nuclear-capable bombers. And this is being reported by the corporate media as a massive failure of Russian air defense systems. And maybe it is. But I think the bigger story here that's not being presented this way here in the West is that this is really a serious escalation of the conflict going on between Russia and Ukraine. Now, please do not think for a moment that we are defending Vladimir Putin in this attack on Russia.
They're just saying that there are spirits behind both sides.
Right. But when you look back over the history of the Cold War from 1947 through this past week, how many times do you recall any airstrike against a Russian base hundreds of miles inside its territory, by a military backed by the United States? The answer to that question is 0. None. It has never happened. This is a big deal.
This is a very big deal. Russia's very upset.
They are.
And we would be the same had were they to come over and launch a missile strike into Alaska?
Yeah. Or imagine, say, China backing the Mexican military in a bid to recover Texas and New Mexico, for example.
Or Iran.
And suddenly, or Iran. But suddenly, there are explosions at, say, Edwards Air Force Base, Nellis Air Force Base. And even though there were a couple of Russian soldiers killed, so these weren't massively destructive airstrikes, but the fact is, one of those air bases was southeast of Moscow, which suggests that Ukraine can now reach Moscow if it so chose. This is why Russia is taking out Ukraine's energy grid. And they didn't do it early on because I think they were hoping, and I don't know what's inside Putin's mind. Maybe I'm crediting him with more humanity than he actually has, but I don't think they wanted to destroy the infrastructure in Ukraine. They would have been happy to just say, okay, let's negotiate a peace. We'll take everything east of the Dnipro River and you guys keep everything else and just stay out of NATO.
Let me just say that what's in Putin's mind may or may not matter in the long run.
Right.
He's got senior generals around him who may eventually take over. But because I keep seeing stories of that. But more than that, the Wagner Group is it's a group of mercenaries who have no soul. They have no hearts. Yeah. They will do anything to win, and that means they will go through and destroy everybody and all the infrastructure. They don't care.
And they're going through a lot of ammunition, according to a report I read. But over this past week, we've also seen...
By we, I mean Ukraine.
Well, that's it. We, as part of a big omnibus spending bill, which, again, we've not actually had a budget for years now. It's just a continuing resolution to just keep, okay, we'll agree the government will keep spending money. They are adding another $38 billion in aid to Ukraine. That's supposed to be voted on... may already have been voted on. I missed it, but I think the vote was supposed to be, the negotiations and the vote supposed to take place this coming week. But that $38 billion is exactly what Volodymyr Zelensky says his government needs to continue operations, which means that when it passes and we send that money to Ukraine, we, the American taxpayer, are essentially funding the Ukrainian government. So we're paying for our government, we're paying for Ukraine's government too.
We've been doing that for a long time. The United States is the primary contributor to NATO. And the NATO nations benefit from our protection of them, which is what started a lot of this in the first place, because the United States was placing anti-missile batteries in countries
Romania
that
and
are...
Poland.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, the Biden administration says in addition to... When you add together the military and the humanitarian aid that we've sent to Ukraine, it's already like $100 billion over the past, 8 months since the end of February when the invasion took place. This is a government that was, the Ukrainian government that was well known as being really, really corrupt. You pay to play in Ukraine. That's just how it goes. Suddenly now, Volodymyr Zelensky is a hero. He's Time Magazine's Man of the Year. That was announced this week. But a week ago, the Biden administration, according to CNN, is considering dramatically increasing its training of Ukrainian forces. And they admitted a couple of weeks prior to that we've got soldiers on the ground in Ukraine to try to keep tabs on all the weapons that we've been sending to Ukraine, because Europeans have been complaining. In fact, Europol, which is sort of a European police force, complained that weapons being sent to Ukraine were showing up in the hands of armed criminal gangs in Finland.
Exactly. We don't know.
They're going into
anything.
the black market.
No, we don't know. But here's the other thing. Because we are arming Ukraine, whether it is the thing to do or not, it means that we're depleting the resources that the United States has to defend itself.
Right. And this is becoming an issue. Again, this is not being widely reported in the corporate media here in the West.
I tweet it.
Well, you do. But again, you and I are looking for sources that go beyond the Washington Post and New York Times and CNN and USA Today. The militaries of Europe are already nearly depleted as far as their weapon stocks. Here in the U.S., generals inside the Pentagon are quietly saying, we really don't have enough left to fight a war if suddenly China decides to attack Taiwan, which will probably happen at some point. Russia is slowly grinding down the military readiness of the U.S. and NATO. In fact, Lockheed Martin just got a $1 billion contract to supply more anti-aircraft missiles to Ukraine. And what they're going to do, rather than build them and then send them once they're complete, which would take some time, they're going to take the batteries that are already deployed in the Persian Gulf from the UAE and send those to Ukraine, and then send new ones to the UAE, which means the UAE, which is like Saudi Arabia, in opposition to Iran.
But here's what they...
And directly across the Persian Gulf from Yemen, where the Iranian-backed Houthi rebels are using missiles to hit Saudi targets.
So what you're saying is that these military contractors are making a whole lot of money.
And high-ranking European politicians are complaining about that. Politico, about a week ago, ran a story on this, that European Union politicians saying, wait a minute, we're the ones who are paying these massively inflated prices now for energy because we've lost access to cheap Russian natural gas, thanks to the United States, or whoever it was who bombed the Nord Stream 1 and 2 pipelines. We are going to face a very cold, European politicians. We're facing a cold winter here. And the only ones who seem to be coming out well in this are the United States, because and this was emphasized this past week when Biden and Rishi Sunak, the PM in the UK, announced a big deal for liquefied natural gas coming from the United States.
Right.
And, Downing Street says, this is great. This energy security and blah-de-blah-de-blah.
Except it's not.
Yeah, but oil and gas drillers in the UK are saying we're sitting on top of a 50 to 100 year supply of natural gas ourselves that we could extract if the government would lift the ban on fracking.
Exactly.
But they won't. Where's the gas coming from in the United States? Fracking. Let the Americans frack all they want. We're not going to do it.
Just mine some coal.
Or mine coal.
That's what the Chinese do.
Most
Most of their electricity is produced by coal.
Yeah, this is all ridiculous. But the United States energy producers are doing better because suddenly we've got these new deals to send more LNG to Europe, to the UK. Our weapons manufacturers are making deals to supply more guns and bombs and missiles to Ukraine and to other European allies. So the Europeans are like, look, are you guys really our allies or what? The Western coalition is beginning to fracture. And we saw a hint of this with Olaf Scholz, the German chancellor, visiting China. And there are those who see that this move may have been prompted by German industrialists who are saying, look, we're suddenly in a disadvantageous position thanks to the loss of the Nord Stream pipeline. Germany's industry was doing really well because they had cheap energy from French nuclear plants and from Russian natural gas. Suddenly, now the French are pulling back because, they need their own natural gas supplies because they need their own energy sources. The Germans You got German industries saying we can no longer afford to do business because suddenly our energy costs have spiked.
We're seeing the same pattern that was leading up to World War I.
Yes,
I am telling
yes.
you, there's a reason why Jesus said, in the final days you will see wars and rumors of wars. That is exactly what we're watching. Warfare's been with us all along. I think the Lord may have been referring to the spirits behind these world leaders. And he is, these spirits, they are all trying to see who, it's like a game of musical thrones, who gets the last one. And all behind it all is this entity, Leviathan, chaos, Tiamat, whatever you want to call this original rebel that's been orchestrating a whole lot of evil throughout the millennia. This is what we're seeing, that the fallout in the material space in which you and I live is warfare. And there are human beings that will go along with it so that they can make some money or maybe gain some territory or a little bit of power.
It's the supernatural equivalent, spiritual equivalent of a game that's played by rival governments. Elite capture. Let's find a greedy, wealthy, powerful guy inside that other country, and we'll pay him to do what we want. And he'll do it because it makes him rich, doesn't care what happens to the other citizens. We got plenty of elites here in the United States who are on the payroll of other nations.
It's called treason.
It is called treason, but it is a game that has been played by politicians for
all over
thousands
the place.
and thousands of years.
We see it in Rome. We saw it, far before that. This is an old game. That probably the earliest again.
There are
chaos.
some who believe that it was the priests of Marduk who opened the gates to Cyrus so that the Persians could overrun Babylon back in 538 BC.
Oh, that's interesting.
Because they were upset that the last king of Babylon, Nabonidus, was a moon god worshiper and wanted to replace Marduk at the top of the pantheon.
They were going to lose their phony baloney jobs.
Right. So they threw open the gates, and Cyrus was like, hey, you guys can, Marduk will still be the king of the pantheon. So anyway, that is an important aspect when trying to look at geopolitics.
And
as
getting
you say,
back to cheesy movies.
Theopolitics.
One of the cheesy movies we watched today, believe it or not, Peter Graves, who was, in the TV show Fury when I was growing up. Later on, he was in Mission Impossible.
Mission Impossible.
And, of course, Peter Graves, very young Peter Graves, mind you.
He played the pilot in the airplane.
He did. And, of course, he was a pilot in this, but he was also, a brilliant scientist. And the plot, if you can call it a plot, because there seemed to be several.
It was a big hole instead of a plot.
It was, oh, my goodness. It was like a whole bunch of different movies that had been thrown and jammed in together. But basically, it was the idea that aliens were living in subterranean world beneath either the southwestern United States somewhere, and they were using our own electric grid to power their massive machine of some kind that allowed them to genetically alter insects and reptiles so that these gigantic offspring
It's like
let me finish. Would kill all the human beings, and then the aliens would continue using the electric grid, which with the humans gone, I'm trying to figure out how they're doing that. But they would continue using it to power their machines and kill off all these gigantic entities. And these entities, along with, I suppose, the human bodies, would decompose, and they would cause a very fertile earth to provide, going back to the Garden of Eden idea. This is just a retelling of the Old Testament. And these entities with the buggy eyes they look like the old Sammy Terry from my childhood days in Indiana. Sammy Terry, who hosted the late night horror movies. Yeah. He had everything but the bulgy eyes. They just had these sort of ping pong balls with on it. But anyway, they were. If you think of these entities as spirit beings, they're trying to trick mankind into playing along with their own destruction. And when it's all over, these entities somehow think that they're going to return and take over the earth and create an Edenic culture. They are going to control the Mount of Assembly. They're going to kick the Lord off. It's the old plan.
It's about who gets dominion over the earth.
Yeah. Peter Graves.
It's like, we need to make the movie 15 minutes longer. Let's get all the stock footage from all these other giant atomic monster movies.
It was the worst ever movie, but
giant salamander.
But it gets into archetypes, which is then, and not that podcast, but the idea that there are certain types of I guess creatures. Individuals who play the role, and I think there are only about 12 of them. And you've got the princess and the villain and the hero and the anti-hero and all these various archetypes that you draw upon when you write fiction, but the same archetypes are in our own history. And the greatest of all these is our Savior. If you are listening to this and you're laughing along with us, we have such joy in our hearts that we can look at all this darkness around us and we can laugh about the cheesy movies and we can see the messaging behind it that parallels our own Old Testament, our own stories. There is a reason that all of this is being allowed to continue, because the Lord is allowing the fallen realm's plans to come to fruition. And then he's just going to take care of them in one word. You only have to speak a word. Doesn't have to have a weapon.
That's right.
Doesn't have to have anything.
Mouth, yeah.
Yes, exactly. And he died for you. If you're thinking, well, that why would he do that? Because he loves you. Do I understand that? No, I really don't. But I do know that he does love me and he does love you.
I think if we look at it from the standpoint of human parents and the way we love our children, why would God create us knowing we were going to rebel and do evil things to one another? Well, why do any parents have children knowing that their children will eventually misbehave and try to lie their way out of it? Does that make us happy? No, of course not. But we do it, and we would be willing to die for them, just as our Lord and Savior was willing to die for us.
So true. And this is the season when we celebrate the incarnation, when we celebrate Jesus coming as a baby. Was he actually born in December? Probably not. There a lot of research, again, getting back to Mike Heiser, seems to point to September. But regardless of when he was born as a human being, and he was fully human and fully divine, and he did that so that he could become the true human, fully human king, fully divine, to sit on that throne. He's the one that throne belongs to, not Satan, not Zeus, not any of those. He is the one who will sit on that throne one day, and he will not be a baby when he comes back.
No, riding on a white horse at the head of a heavenly army. Yeah. And he'll be all out of bubble gum.
Once again, cheesy movie reference. But you can see we laugh a lot because we are joyful. And we want you, too, to be joyful, to know where your future lies.
Amen.
If you haven't accepted Christ as your Savior, now is the time to do it.
And it's really easy. It's not complicated. There are, I thought for a long time that you had to be a theological expert somehow to really understand the gift of salvation.
No, a child can understand it.
Paul makes it very simple. And my eyes were opened to this by friends of ours who've written a number of books on apologetics and how to witness and taking the stress out of witnessing. And that's the other part. If you're sharing the gospel with somebody, you don't need to close the deal like an insurance salesman.
No.
Just plant the seed and let the Holy Spirit worry about it. But they point out that in 1 Corinthians 15, Paul just lays out the gospel very simply in one sentence. I delivered to you as of first importance what I also received, that Christ died for our sins in accordance with the Scriptures, that he was buried, that he was raised on the third day in accordance with the Scriptures. And he calls this the gospel which you received, in which you stand, and by which you are being saved. That's it. Just accept the historical fact of Christ's death and resurrection.
Exactly. Understand that you need that salvation.
Yeah.
You need his covering. You need his blood sacrifice. And then just talk to him. Ask him to save you.
Yeah, that's that simple.
Yes,
and it's really profound too, because when you start digging into some of the weird stuff we do, like the Psalm 82 stuff, you don't need to know any of that to be saved.
It's the ABCs: accept, believe, confess.
Yeah. Psalm 82 and the other deeper stuff about the divine counsel and the unseen realm just helps us to understand what we're being saved from.
Exactly. And once you are a believer, you're going to get excited and you're going to want to know all about him. And that's the kind of stuff that Derek and I are excited about.
Mm-hmm.
So,
That's why we do what we do.
We do indeed. So thank you for joining us once again, our crazy, crazy show. We're going to do one more before Christmas, I think.
Yeah. And there will be actually a couple more views from the bunker, my weekly podcast.
That's good.
This week, tomorrow night, Sunday night, will be Guy Malone.
Oh, he was one of our first guests on P.I.D. Radio.
He was. He's down in Roswell, still down in Roswell. Now he's working as a copy editor for Bitcoin Magazine. So I interviewed him about the FTX cryptocurrency exchange collapse. Sam Bankman-Fried, what does that all mean? Why is Bitcoin different from cryptocurrency at large? And I say that we don't own any crypto. I have no desire. Don't own Bitcoin. Don't have any desire to. But there are some differences there worth understanding, and the implications of what Bankman-Fried has done worth talking about. And we got a couple of other programs. Actually, just exchanged some emails last night. Every month on A View from the Bunker, once a month, a group of us have a roundtable discussion that we've called Iron and Myth. Judd Burton gets credit for that. Judd, Doug Van Dorn, who I mentioned, and our friend Brian Godawa, who's a novelist, award-winning screenwriter. We just kind of sit and talk, just kick around various ideas. We were going to talk this month about the hierarchy inside the spirit realm. Mm-hmm. What's the difference between an angel and an archangel? Are demons angels, or where do they come from, and what are the ranks of demons? We'll talk about that. In January, we've decided instead to put out a program on Christmas Eve talking about Christmas and where it came from, and should Christians even celebrate Christmas.
Good.
So, but you'll find that at vftb.net, or better yet, just get the app. So until next time, I'm Derek Gilbert.
I'm Sharon Gilbert. Bye-bye, everybody.
P.I.D. Radio is an outreach of Gilbert House Ministries, released under Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, No Derivatives 4.0 International License. Follow us online, PIDradio.com, Twitter @PID Radio, or by downloading our free app, PIDradio.com/app, or GilbertHouse.org/app. Our theme is Adoration by Casper McLeod, CasperMcLeodMusic.com. Join us each week or at our app for our Bible study, the Gilbert House Fellowship.